and then we'll keep going. So today is all about looking at social isolation and loneliness. And I'm going to give you a brief introduction in a minute to Churchworks. If you're kind of newish to Churchworks or can't remember what we do, I'll give you a whistle-stop tour. And then Esther's going to speak to us a little bit about the context of social isolation. And then we're going to have a chance to quickly hear from each other and think about how we see social isolation and loneliness playing out in our own individual contexts. So we'll have just a little bit of time for a breakout room to discuss some of that. And then we're going to hear from 3 of our partner organisations this afternoon. So we've got Linking Lives, Safe Families and Renew Wellbeing, as well as Esther sharing a little bit about Warm Welcome, which is another one of our Churchworks kind of campaigns. And then there's going to be a brief chance for you to ask questions to our organisations as well. So hopefully it's going to be a very valuable afternoon for you. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview of Churchworks. Can everybody see that? Give me a thumbs up if you can see.
Yeah.
Brilliant. We're on to a good start. Okay, so Churchworks originally came out of Your Neighbour, which was a kind of church response to COVID recovery. And out of the back of Your Neighbour, there was a kind of agreement that actually churches still wanted to convene and address kind of social issues. And so the Churchworks Commission was born in October 2021. And it's made up of 15 commissioning organisations that are represented by senior church leaders across the key kind of Christian denominations in the country. And we exist really to help churches and Christian organisations collaborate with each other and the government around 3 key priorities. And that is well-being and mental health, vulnerable children and families, and the cost of living.
Get rid of one.
And what we do is we run events, conferences.
The words are coming through twice. Just slightly.
If you could just put yourself on mute, whoever's got their microphone on, that would be wonderful. Yeah, so we run events, conferences, webinars, and we also undertake research as well to encourage really ecumenical partnership working. That's what we're all about, collaboration and coming together. And so next year, we're actually quite excited. We're going to be launching a membership offer for our local churches for the first time, launching in kind of February. And that's going to involve kind of sending you regular newsletters, getting invites to online events like this and in-person events, having access to our partner organisations, a few of which you're going to hear from today, and giving you networking opportunities. We'll also kind of share resources with you that help you address the needs of the most vulnerable in your communities, which is what we're really passionate about doing. And we actually kind of launched a membership survey a couple of months ago, and we asked 280 church leaders a number of questions about what they would find interesting about being a member of Churchworks, or what are the issues they're addressing as a church. And the top 3 issues that came up that churches said that they're seeking to address: mental health and well-being, cost of living, and number 1 was social isolation and loneliness. And that is the reason why we've chosen to base this event on that topic today, as a direct response to what you as churches have told us you are facing. And Esther's going to tell us a little bit in a second about the context of why we're discussing this as well. But just to share a brief story, because I don't know about you, but I always find kind of like stories kind of really solidify and land the importance of what we're talking about. I was in a coffee shop just yesterday, doing some work, engrossed in my work with my headphones in, and an older gentleman sat down next to me and he said kind of, "Oh, what are you doing? And what do you do?" And really wanted to talk. And I took my headphones out and he said, "Oh, my wife's actually in a care home and I don't really have anyone to talk to. And I love talking to younger people." And we had a chat for about 10 minutes, and it made me just realize the importance of what we're talking about today, that we are living in a society that is disconnected and that is craving connection. And so that's what we're going to be hoping to address this afternoon. I'm going to hand over to my colleague Esther now.
Great, thank you, Emma. I'm actually calling from a conference that's being run by the Belong Network today, which is all about social cohesion. So really good to be able to join this event while I'm at the conference, and I'm hoping that the Wi-Fi will hold up for us. So as Emma said, I'm just going to briefly kind of give a bit of a broader setting of the scene of what is going on around social isolation across the UK at the moment. And so I think the most helpful place to start is just by being clear on what we mean by social isolation and what we mean when we talk about loneliness. So social isolation is a kind of objective, factual description of the situation. Oh, are you struggling to hear me? Is that all right? Okay. I'll try and speak clearly. So social isolation is a factual, objective description of the situation that somebody is in. So it's when you have a lack of social contact. There is a kind of factual description of you being socially isolated from other people. But loneliness is a subjective feeling. So there's this description here that was taken from a report from the Department for Civil Society. Can't remember what media and sport. And they describe loneliness as a subjective, unwelcome feeling of a lack or loss of companionship. It happens when there's a mismatch between the quantity and the quality of the social relationships that we have and those that we want. And so you can be not socially isolated at all and be very lonely because you can still have that subjective feeling, or we can be socially isolated and not feeling lonely. Those who have particularly reported feeling lonely are this kind of list of people on the slide here. So 16 to 24-year-olds, females are more likely to report being lonely than males, people who are single or who are widowed, those who have a mental health condition, people who are renting rather than own their own homes, and those who are in a neighbourhood where there's belonging, lower belonging or social trust. If you go to the next slide, that'd be lovely. Thank you. And so these stats are taken from Campaign to End Loneliness, which is a great website, great resources on there all around loneliness and isolation. And they have shared some statistics here that the impact of loneliness on people is an increased risk of depression, early mortality, and increased risk of acute stress. 62% of lonely young people saying that feeling lonely causes them to lose confidence in themselves. And the cost of loneliness is almost £10,000 per person per year due to the impact on well-being and health and work productivity. And the most recent kind of piece of research that's been done around loneliness is called The State of Loneliness in Britain. That was some surveying run by the Office for National Statistics, and they said that in 2020 chronic loneliness was at 6% of the UK population. It's now risen to 7.1%. So COVID has had a severe impact on the number of people that are saying they're lonely, and it has. More people under 30 have been lonely in the last 2 years than in 2021. So again, chronic loneliness has increased since the pandemic and is staying at those levels. And actually, contrary to kind of what we might kind of naturally think, chronic loneliness declines as people get older, which is really interesting. And people with mental health diagnoses or physical health diagnoses are 3 more times likely to be chronically lonely. Finally, I just want to share a little bit about what's happening on a kind of policy level in the UK. So we do have a Minister for Loneliness who's in the Department for Civil Society, Media and Sport. That role was appointed in 2018, and the current minister is Stuart Andrew. And the Minister for Loneliness and that department have 3 objectives: to reduce stigma by kind of raising the national conversation on loneliness, to drive a lasting shift so that loneliness is considered in policy making, and then also to play their part in kind of building an evidence base and an understanding of what works in tackling loneliness and building social cohesion. And next year is their 5-year review. There's a a big conference is happening for the Campaign to End Loneliness, which is the government funded arm of the work that they're doing. And so lots of what the government are doing at the moment within the work of Minister for Loneliness is around funding work that is effectively combating loneliness. It's about communications and increasing conversation around this. It's about evidence reviews and understanding what works, and promoting collaboration between different organisations who are trying to tackle loneliness. So that's a sort of whistle-stop tour of the context and what the government are doing. I'd really recommend for kind of broader resources that are covering the kind of full spectrum of society and what's going on to tackle loneliness. I'd recommend looking at the Campaign to End Loneliness website, where there's some really helpful resources.
Thank you, Esther. And we'll be we can share the slides from this event afterwards as well, so you've got access to those links too. So that's a bit about what's happening in the kind of national context. Churchworks is all about what's happening nationally, what's happening with government, but also what's happening at a local level. What are we seeing on the ground as churches? And so we wanted to take the opportunity now, because I don't know about you, but if I sit and listen for the whole time at an event, sometimes I can start to kind of drift off. But also because you've got valuable perspectives to share with each other. And we're going to break into some breakout rooms for about 10 to 12 minutes. We're going to be hearing a bit more about warm welcome in a bit. And I think one of the things that I heard there, which is we've heard kind of nationally as well, is that people kind of often come to the warm spaces for food or for warmth, but actually the deeper need is social connection. And that's what keeps them coming back. Heard about young people as well, and young people being isolated through kind of largely living digitally. And actually that's what we're going to focus our next Churchworks event on, young people and mental health. So I'll tell you a bit more about that at the end of this. And something around kind of just taking an interest in people and getting them into something. And actually, once you can get someone into something, actually they start to come to lots of different things. So it can be just that kind of initial connection, connecting them up with something that can then really get them involved in community. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to kind of hand over to some of our different partner organisations, and they are really going to share what they're doing to tackle this issue. And what they've got in terms of resources for you as churches to use. So the first person I'd love to introduce is Jeremy from Linking Lives. So over to you, Jeremy.
Thanks, Emma. If you could give me co-host rights, that'd be great, and then I'll share my PowerPoint.
Yeah, let me do that now. There we go.
Great. Brilliant. Can everyone see that? Yeah, brilliant. Okay, great. So my name's Jeremy Sharp. I'm National Director of Linking Lives UK. And I'm just going to briefly outline some of our work, particularly focusing on loneliness and social isolation, which is our focus as a charity. There are three ways that we engage with churches and Christians around the country to address social isolation and loneliness. So I'll very briefly unpack those in the time that we've got. And I'll also introduce Kath, who's our coordinator of Bedford Linking Lives, and she'll just give you a bit of a flavour of what it's like to run a befriending scheme on a local level within her area. So just to start with, this is a photo of a guy called Terry, who I first met in around about 2000, so going back several years ago. He really was in a spiral of depression at the time that I met him. He was referred to us by a social worker, very rarely left his house, yeah, you could only really describe him as a kind of classic example of someone who's very much shut in, and unable to engage with the rest of society. And you hear statistics about certain numbers of millions of people for whom TV are their only form of company. For Terry, he didn't have a TV at all. So really his company was a cockatiel. You can probably make out the cage there, and he had a radio. He listened to Radio 4 every day. But this picture really just summarises the point where I was a community worker and had started to visit Terry back in the 2000s, and his situation really confirmed or raised questions for me as to how does the church and how do we as Christians reach out to people in situations such as those that Terry is in. He's an extreme example for obvious reasons, and you can see the situation and circumstances that he was living in at that time. This is a more recent photo. So this is John, who I visit regularly at the moment in my local community. Believe it or not, he's 96 years old. His wife died several years ago. And so that was pretty much of a trigger point for him and his life. He didn't go necessarily into a sense of depression, but he's really struggled, I think it would be fair to say, since then. But the amazing thing is he stopped playing golf last year. So he's been a very active gentleman most of his life, and he just values a bit of extra company in his day-to-day life, which I'm really pleased to be able to do. Couple of photos of him when he was in his early 20s, just to give you a flavour. So this was him on the top of each of these, and that was something he was very much involved in, balancing acts and going all around the country and performing to groups of people. So a very fit young man, and that really carried on throughout the rest of his life as well. So very contrasting examples of people for whom loneliness is a big issue in their lives. So I'll just explain a little bit about what we do. So 3 examples really of projects and initiatives that we run in partnership with local churches. The first one, Two's Company, is a befriending model which began in our local area here in Berkshire around about 25 years ago. So it's really just one of the key things that we do, and Linking Lives exists to inspire, equip and enable Christians and churches to address loneliness in local communities. So this model is a tried and tested model of befriending, where volunteer visitors go and pop in on people who need extra company on a regular basis. We get referrals from social workers and social prescribers, who I think we're going to be hearing about later. And we've got at the moment 40 partnerships around the country of churches and Christian groups which are running befriending schemes. We've also recently in the last year developed a volunteer training package called Good Conversations. This is run either online or face-to-face, and it's really aimed at volunteers that are based in community settings, whether that be community cafes, drop-in centres, or other activities on a local level. We cover things like effective listening skills, boundaries, safeguarding, and some of the spaces that we might operate include warm welcome spaces as well, which I know some of you are likely to be running within your community. Those are free. If you're running a warm welcome space, it's free to access those, and you can find details of that in the training resource area of the warm welcome hub. And then thirdly, we run regular monthly webinars, one specifically called The Power of One, and that's all about the impact that all of us can make on an individual level. Even if we're not involved in a project or a charity or a church, we can all make a difference in our own day-to-day lives, and we unpack some of the skills and ideas that we can all use in that situation. We're also developing new projects all the time, which I haven't really got time to go into now, but we've got a specific focus as well geographically in Scotland and in Devon at the moment as well. So that's a brief rundown of who we are. If you'd like to find out more about any of our work, you can go to our website, which you can find there. But I'll pass over now to Kath, who is based in Bedford, just to give you a little bit more background on our work on a local level in Bedford.
Thank you. Oh, hi, thank you. My name's Kath, and I'm the coordinator for we call ourselves Linking Lives Bedford, and we're a befriending scheme that's set up in April 2020. So you've probably all have that date quite clearly in your mind. We've just started the COVID pandemic lockdown. I'm part of a church called Woodside Church in Bedford, and that is part of the Catalyst network of churches, which is related to New Frontiers. About 20 years ago, our church set up a social outreach program called Project 41. And where the main church is based, it's in quite a socially deprived area. So we have a drop-in on a Thursday morning, and people really that are on the edges of society were coming along and having a cup of coffee, a chat, and we would have local agencies, housing associations, social prescribers, different people would come in and people could get support. And it was noticed that more and more people were becoming more lonely and socially isolated. And a decision was made in the church to set up a befriending scheme. And they connected with Linking Lives UK, who have been absolutely fantastic. They provide everything that you need in planning your scheme, setting it up. You've just seen from Jeremy's slides, everything is very professional, really well thought out. You've provided with all the paperwork, all the training. And then we have very regular coordinator meetings, so you can network with other coordinators and share your highs and lows and get inspiration and ideas from each other. And there's also an annual conference. I think it's annual, is it, Jeremy? Which is really inspirational and a great thing. So the church pays £200 a year at the moment, and every penny is so well spent. You know, you can always go to Linking Lives and ask there's always someone that can help you out if you need to ask a question and find something out. We set ourselves up a little bit differently in that we will befriend people that are 18 plus upwards. So we recognised all the stats that Emma was giving at the beginning. I think the majority of our referrals will be for people aged over 60, but increasingly we are getting referrals for men who are in their 30s and 40s. And quite successfully, in my opinion, we've got a group of 4 20, 21-year-olds, and we meet up in a local cafe once a week. And I think someone mentioned in the chat they're probably have not done so well in school, maybe on the autism spectrum, or have other special needs. And they now have a social group that they really look forward to every week. And that has been so great for the younger people. Most of the people of our befrienders promise to go and visit once a week. They're going to have a cup of tea and a chat with someone who's been referred into us. We work with 2 of the main social prescribing organisations in Bedford, which is totally fantastic. On our Thursday morning drop-in, there will always be one branch of social prescribers there, and then once a month the other branch of social prescribers comes along on a Thursday morning as well. So we work really closely with social prescribers. Oh, right, something happened, I'm not too sure what. And then for the first time over this year, we held a focus group and invited organisations that we work with to come in, which was social prescribers, the caring agencies, other befriending schemes, which again was really great for us networking. And we find that we now get invited to go along to things because we are seen as someone in the town that is providing real support for people that are lonely and isolated. I'm probably running out of time. We have external funding, which is great, but you also have your hands tied, but we have funding for 2 posts. Have I got time to read 2 or 3 comments from people we're befriending or not?
You got 1, Kath. I'll allow you 1 comment.
Okay then. I have benefited hugely from having a befriender. I would say it's been a lifesaver for me. My life is so challenging. I've literally got no one else My befriender makes me feel that someone cares for me. It makes me feel that I've got no self, that it makes me feel I've got self-worth and have some value. I know that she likes me, and that makes a huge difference to me. It must be that I'm a likable person. I love the way that she chooses to spend her spare time with me. So sorry, Bob, I know I've gone over.
That's a wonderful place to end. Thank you, Kat. That's what an amazing testimony, isn't it? For someone to feel like actually their self-worth is being impacted by having a friend and someone to listen to them. That's what it's all about, isn't it? Thank you, Jeremy, as well. I'm going to ask you just to post the link to your website in the chat. And as Jeremy said, there's some great resources available from Linking Lives. If you've got any questions for Jeremy, hold on to them. There will be a chance to kind of ask some questions in a little bit. But for now, I'm going to pass over to Martin from Safe Families to tell us a little bit more about the course that they have developed.
Great stuff. Thank you, Emma. Emma, can I just say thank you to you and your team at Churchworks for putting this event on such an important subject. I'm very grateful to you for that. Let me tell you Zoe's story. Zoe was a little girl I met a few years ago. She was with her social worker at the time. Zoe was about 6, and she was deeply upset when I met her. The social worker explained to me that the reason Zoe was upset was because she was missing her parents. And she was missing her parents because Zoe had been taken into local authority care. The social worker said to me, Martin, the heartbreaking thing about this situation is that Zoe's parents weren't bad people. They just weren't great parents. And so they hit a crisis point. And because they were lonely and they were socially isolated, that crisis very quickly became chaotic. And for Zoe, that chaos meant local authority care proceedings. And Zoe had been taken from her family. She said, Martin, it's so sad because really the problem was that they had nobody there for them. If only somebody could have been there for them at the point of crisis, all of this could have been prevented. Well, it broke my heart because I had started working at a youth organisation, Youth for Christ, and my role was about helping churches engage with local children and families in their communities. And every month for 10 years, I'd been chatting to church leaders who were in about a mile of Zoe's home, who desperately wanted to connect with families like Zoe's. And they'd put on all their services and they'd done all their special events. And Zoe and her family and lots like them had never come to their events. They put on their events and they were desperate to connect with the families. And the families were desperate to connect with somebody who wanted to support them. And nobody had joined the two together. And that can't be right. I think our local churches are ideally placed and called to be there for those folks who need our support. Safe Families join the dots. That's what we do as an organisation. We were founded ultimately to prevent children going into care. And in the last 10 years, in partnership with them, 5,000 volunteers from about 1,400 churches across the country, and in contractual partnership with 56 local authorities. Together, we've worked to support 21,000 children and 9,000 families. But we've got a track record of helping churches work alongside local authorities to engage with the types of folks that we desperately want to get involved in. And we help churches do what churches want to do anyway. In the course of those kind of 10 years, we've learned that one thing, when it's apparent and present in a family situation, has an exponentially impactful, exponentially big impact on those families' lives. And of course, it's loneliness and isolation. When loneliness and isolation is present, alongside any of the other things that people face, their issues suddenly become a whole lot harder to deal with because they can't escape from them. There's nobody around to help them. And so we've been supporting families to break loneliness and isolation through the offer of belonging. We enable churches to help people feel seen, heard and understood. The problem is we can only do that in areas where we've got local authority contracts. And so we began to think, how can we enable churches to basically take from all this experience we've got over the last 10 years and put it into action for themselves in their own churches? And the answer for us was the Belonging course. And that's what I'd like to introduce to you today. It's a 6-week small group course for church small groups which explores what loneliness and isolation really means, uses some of those government statistics that we were shown earlier today. Then it talks around the importance of that connection that we can make, but how we can do it safely and effectively in ways that we don't burn out and cause ourselves difficulty. So let me just give you a little sense of what it's like. It's free. Churches can sign up. It's absolutely free, as I say. Sign up, you register for the course, and then you get access to the course. And I'll show you what it looks like, if I may. So you would log in, and the login gives you access to all the data. There's some essential guidance for people who haven't got much experience of running small groups. Explains about setting the right atmosphere, making sure people feel safe, etc. And then there's a leader's guide for each of the sessions that takes you through what the session deals with, the key themes. Each session starts with some Bible study. Then it talks from some expert perspective on the subject we're dealing with on that day. And then ask some discussion questions for small groups to work through. So the 6 sessions, all the information you can download. It's all video based, so you can download it and play it through. And then so you log into each session and you get this information, so you can download the videos, the leader's guide, the transcript of the session. This is all what you'll find on the website. I'll give you a quick overview of each of the sessions, and then we'll hear from somebody who's been leading this with their church. So session 1 is around loneliness and the consequences of loneliness, how it affects people from all walks of life, regardless of whether they feel connected or not. We make the point that loneliness and isolation are different. Session 2, we talk about understanding ourselves. So that's the difference between solitude and isolation, and how solitude is actually a really good thing for us. The more we can understand ourselves and how God sees us, the more we can understand those around us. Seen, heard, and understood talks around how we can cultivate empathy and what it looks like to stand with people, to see, hear, and understand them. We talk around some of the barriers to belonging, so empathy and how we can create space for healing and renewal, talking about the idea that trauma is actually a barrier to belonging and how can we work through that. Session 5 is all about healthy boundaries for us as we support others so we don't burn out. And then finally, session 6 is all about empowerment and about how we can help people find a community for themselves and how to build community around themselves. I'll show you a quick trailer for it, and then I'm going to hand over to somebody who can help us understand how it works on the ground.
Welcome to the Belonging course. Over the next 6 sessions, we're going to be learning about God's heart for belonging. We're going to think about how to really see, hear, and understand one another, how to love others well, and how this can help us and those we connect with experience the life in all its fullness that Jesus promises. Each week, we'll study some Bible passages together, we'll hear some insight from experts, and we'll spend some time in our groups discussing what it means for all of us.
The point we're trying to make there is that it's belonging is the antidote to loneliness and isolation, that ability to feel seen, heard, and understood. It's my privilege and pleasure then to hand over to Reverend Maureen Collins, who's the leader at St. Anne with Emmanuel Church in Nottingham. And she leads the first church to have taken part in the Belonging course. So she's just going to give us a little sense of how it's been to be part of it herself as a participant in the group.
Okay, thank you. I mean, it's a great course. It's really good. It's easy to run. If you're a church leader, that's really important. It's got the videos, it's got questions, it's even got branding, it's even got a transcript of the sessions. So you can actually, it's really easy to get to know what you're supposed to be doing without it taking a lot of preparation yourself, which is a very practical thing. It's got the Bible content, it's got psychology, explanation of why loneliness is important or why not being lonely is important. And it's got some key people talking about from their experience, you know, experts, but sharing personal stories as well, which kind of grounds it. It gives you a challenge at the end of something to actually try that week. And so I've had 3 groups in my church doing it. I haven't actually led any of them, but I've been into different ones, and they've been, you know, they're small groups. I would say the only thing I would say is if you are in an area like where I work, which is quite an area of deprivation, an area of low educational standards, sometimes you need to kind of reword things a bit, particularly in the questions, because you know, like it used words like introvert and extrovert, which some of my people didn't know what those words meant. So, you know, that's just a caution. If you are in an area where it's not middle class and well educated, then you might need to just explain a few things a bit more. But I think it's great. As I say, it's got the reasoning, the explanations, it's got the Bible, it's got practical experience. And it covers, I mean, just in that little breakout room, some of the things that people were saying, I was thinking, oh yes, it says that. Oh yes, the belonging course. So yeah, I would recommend it. And obviously it's free. So yeah, try it. I think it's helpful in because one of my challenges as a Safe Families supporter is getting people in the church to actually get involved with it. And I'm hoping that one of the results of people doing this course is that they'll see the benefit even more of our Renew Centre, our place of welcome, our Safe Families support. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Maureen. And perhaps Maureen and Martin, you might want to kind of speak a bit more to the question we've had here in the chat around how do you get people to attend this kind of course? So Maureen, if you wouldn't mind kind of sharing some of your wisdom in the chat, that would be wonderful. But great to hear kind of this resource and how it's kind of played out for you as a church. Fabulous. I'm going to move us on now to, we've talked a lot about warm welcome so far. This might be a new concept to you. This might be kind of old news, but Esther in our team does a lot of work on our kind of national warm welcome campaign, and she's just going to chat briefly and interview someone who runs a warm welcome space. So over to you, Esther.
Great, thanks so much, Emma. And yes, I'm sure lots of you have heard of warm welcome. But for those of you who haven't, Warm Welcome exists as a national campaign to turn poverty and isolation into warmth and local connection through the power of local spaces made by and for the community. And it's great that we have Nora with us today, who's going to share a little bit about her warm space and her experience of leading that. So Nora, my first question to you is, tell us a bit about how your church is engaged in warm welcome and what you're doing. I hope Nora's somewhere.
Are you there, Nora?
Oh no, okay, maybe we lost Nora along the way.
Okay, that's okay. We can come back to see if Nora is with us slightly later. But Esther, just from your experience, what would you say has been kind of the most impactful thing you've heard from churches when they've decided to run a warm welcome space?
I think often the biggest impact has been that it's enabled church leaders to invite people into the church space without inviting them to church. That it's a really easy sort of first thing to invite people to. That particularly if you pitch it as just like a drop-in space that anybody can come to. And if you are offering like craft, or you're offering children's activities, or you're just saying we're going to have soup and a roll, that's a really good way to invite people who actually really benefit in a gentler way. I've also heard something that I think is really valuable. I've heard church leaders say that they also really value it in terms of the impact on their own you know, their own kind of sense of hope, their own kind of sense of connection to the community, that having a space that everyone can come into and seeing the relationships that start to form is also really, really uplifting and encouraging for people that are running spaces.
Thanks, Esther. I'm going to put the Warm Welcome National Campaign website in the chat. Do that for you now. But that's what I've also heard from church leaders. I support church leaders to run welcoming spaces in Bristol, and I've heard a lot that actually we can prioritise church on a Sunday, but really church is the body of believers welcoming in people in our communities. And Warm Welcome is really about just opening your doors midweek and providing a space that's warm, that's welcoming, that's safe, and that's free to enter. So if you think you can do that, or if you're already running a kind of community cafe or something like that, and you want to know how you can make it into a welcoming space, then do click the link to find out more. Our kind of final speaker and organisation is Reverend Naomi Dickerson from Renew Wellbeing. So welcome, Naomi, and I'm just going to hand over to you to tell us a little bit about Renew Wellbeing.
Well, thank you very much, and good afternoon, everybody. It's great to be here with you. You'll hear some similarities, I think, to Warm Spaces and other community cafe initiatives here, but I'm just going to tell you a bit about what we do as a charity, Renew Wellbeing. So the first Renew Wellbeing space was set up back in 2016, whilst the charity itself was launched in 2017. And across the UK now, we have more than 250 spaces, and they meet both in churches, or they are run by churches in local libraries, on allotments, in coffee shops. So there's a variety in different ways that churches actually run these spaces. But each has been set up with the aim of helping to end isolation and promote well-being. So just some key features really of the well-being spaces, where, as we know, isolation and loneliness continues to be a real and growing concern. We're encouraging and supporting and equipping churches to set up small shared cafe style spaces that are very simple, they're safe, and they are sustainable. And these are places of welcome where anybody can become part of an inclusive community. They're open to those of all faiths and none, but they do have a Christian ethos that underpins them. And as such, each one will have a quiet area for personal reflection and optional prayer. And I will talk a little bit more about that later. But each Renew place is a place where people are known by name. Now, this is something that we found to be particularly important, and it was something that was really on Ruth's heart. She's our founder and the director of the charity, because as she was beginning to set up the first space, she chatted with a lady who told her that the only time she heard her name spoken was when she went to the doctor's surgery and they called her name for an appointment, and the rest of the time she was just home alone. So one really important attribute of the spaces is it, as has been shared by others already, is that people feel seen and known. And we always say names, not labels. It doesn't matter why someone has come along to use the space. It's just great that they're there. Renew spaces develop partnerships within the local community wherever possible. They are places where all are valued and equal. They're places to connect and belong, and they're run by a local church, or in many occasions, we've actually got a group of churches working together, whether that's a partnership of parish churches or ecumenically. There's lots of different expressions of churches working together to do this, which has been great. They're places where it's okay not to be okay, where people don't have to put on a front, they can just come, but places they can gather to make friends and tend to their well-being in a proactive way. And as such, we promote the 5 ways to well-being: connecting, learning, being active, taking notice, and giving. And that's a quick run through really of some of the key attributes of our spaces, some of the key features that you'll find there. But each space does tend to develop differently and look slightly different depending on the context of where they are and those who attend. But each space also, in striving to demonstrate the characteristics I've already outlined, they also have the same DNA, which is built around 3 key principles, as you can see on the screen there: being present, being prayerful, and being in partnership. just quickly to run through these 3 things. Being present is exactly what I've just said, just being there, journeying with people, lending a listening ear where appropriate, but mostly just turning up and being available, offering company and a chat, or sharing hobbies and activities that anyone can join in with. It's about doing things together, whether that's people bringing their knitting and doing an activity they love just in the company of others, so they're not on their own when they're doing that thing they love, or maybe sharing that with someone, showing them how you do it, or maybe coming along and learning a completely new skill or hobby from someone else. Or if you just want to sit and have a cuppa, that's absolutely fine as well. But it really is that simple. What we say to churches is the hard thing sometimes is not overcomplicating it. It's just turning up and being there, and out of each of the different groups, the being present does look different. As I mentioned earlier, some are in libraries, really trying to meet with their community in places that they might go just to find, their love of reading or whatever. But other groups have developed like walking groups out of them. We've got a cycling group, but they do have this commonality of those 3 things, and having this being present is really important. And then the being prayerful, this is a vital part of a Renew space. As I mentioned earlier, each space will have a quiet area which is open throughout the time that the Renew session is running. This may be in the same space as the cafe, or it may be in a nearby area or room. Some churches decide to use their own church sanctuaries, which is fine as well. It really depends on the layout of the building or the space that the church is using as to what works best. But we do ask those that are running the spaces to be mindful of the most anxious when they're thinking about this, and ensure that it's accessible for everybody. So maybe not down a corridor, lots of corridors that feels like a rabbit warren, because that might add to their anxiety. So we want these to be spaces that help people, not hinder. The quiet area can be used at any point during the session. People can just go and sit and reflect quietly if they want to. But there are also times of gathered prayer, which are shared at particular times during the session. Everyone is invited to join in, but it is completely optional. There's no expectation that people have to join in. So generally one of the hosts would just go round the tables and sort of just say, a few of us are going to pray. If you want to come and join us, you're more than welcome. But if you want to carry on doing your activity or drinking your cup of tea, that's absolutely fine. But what we're trying to do in this space is, rather than praying for people, we're trying to pray alongside them, sharing how to pray. So we use very simple prayer patterns, which then hopefully become familiar to those who join in, and maybe those who just want to listen. But again, this is very deliberate, so that people get to know what to expect, and again, helping to reduce anxiety, and hopefully demonstrating that anyone can pray. They don't need to use long sentences or a special vocabulary. And just to give you a quick example of just how simple the prayer patterns are, one of our prayer patterns is simply the Lord's Prayer. We'd pray it through a line at a time, and at the end of each line we just give it a bit of space for quiet, and people are invited to say a word or a sentence, but no more than that, to add their own prayers, and they can do that out loud. But if they just want to do that silently, they can as well. And what's been amazing really is the sense of peace that does seem to sit in those prayer areas, and people often don't want to move after being there, and that's been a real benefit from seeing the prayer areas being used. And the third P that we have is about being in partnership. And we do this to ensure that our spaces are good and safe, and that we don't try to offer more than we realistically can. What we aim for, the gold standard, I guess, is to have a link with a mental health professional, because they can help us to ensure that the spaces are safe and the most helpful for those that might struggle with their mental health. Yeah, it's great to be able to partner with different agencies. And different Renew spaces have different links. So it might be a worker attached to a GP surgery, it might be through the social prescribing programme, it may be a wellbeing officer from the local council, but generally it's someone who is already in that geographical area where the Renew space is located as their best place to advise and help the church to stick to its simple offer of being present, and to signpost to other services as people might need them. So that's what we do as a charity in a very quick few slides. But just to tell you what we can offer you if you're interested and you'd like to think about exploring what a Renew space might look like for you. I mean, you may already have a community cafe and think, oh, we'd like to adapt the prayer rhythms or whatever. But basically we have 8 area coordinators for different geographical areas, and they would be very happy to chat with you about your circumstances, your context, and discuss if or how a Renew space might work for you. We also offer training and ongoing support to churches if they decide to go ahead and set up a space. So we're here to help if helpful. We also offer a number of resources, including the 3 prayer rhythms, and we have meditation cards, wellbeing cards, and we make these available to all our Renew spaces for free, although of course donations are always appreciated to support the charity. And we also, we partner with you, offering opportunities for you to network with other spaces in your area, to attend retreats designed to support those running the spaces. And we also do a national time of prayer each morning that anyone is welcome to join in with if they wish. And these bits are all extra. There's no sort of commitment. If you are a Renew space, you don't have to do these extra bits. But we really see the charity as a family and seek to support churches in running and maintaining their spaces. So just to finish quickly, I've just got a couple of quotes just for people to read here. This one lady said, "You have no idea what a difference Friday mornings have made to my confidence and self-esteem. They have changed an isolated, withdrawn old lady into one who feels ready to face the world." And just a couple of others. Someone says, "Just coming into this space is a real blessing." And someone was telling me the other day, of all the things they have in their week, Renew is the one thing that they really hate to miss. And this little picture on the side is something that someone created because that's what Renew represents to them: peace, friendship, and love. So just in conclusion, Renew Wellbeing helps churches to set up simple, safe, sustainable spaces where it's okay not to be okay. To help tackle issues of loneliness and isolation, and to promote better mental health for all. Their places of welcome and inclusion built around 3 key principles: being prayerful, being present, being in partnership. And the charity is a growing family that provides ongoing support and resources. So please do get in touch if it would be of interest to you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Naomi. That is wonderful to hear about. Again, just to land in those quotes of the difference that those spaces have made to people. If you could stick the link to your website in the chat as well, Naomi, that'd be wonderful. So there you go. There's some really practical resources for you. Everything from kind of opening a physical space in your church to a small group resource to online training for volunteers, befriending schemes, loads of different things that you can kind of access and get involved in depending on where your church is at. And the kind of final thing we wanted to mention in terms of resources or connecting in with what's available in your community is social prescribing, which we've heard a little bit about already this afternoon. But I just want to invite Esther just to share, like, Esther, what is social prescribing? How do people get involved with social prescribing if they're not already? And kind of what resources can we point people to?
Yes, thank you, Emma. So yeah, social prescribing is one of those words which it feels sort of a bit jargony, but it's actually something that we have been doing in our communities for a long time. So social prescribing is a kind of system that connects people to non-medical support to address their broader well-being needs, such as mental health challenges or loneliness and isolation. And it's been recently brought into the NHS and the way the NHS works in 2018. And the NHS, but also local authorities and other community organisations employ what are called social prescribing link workers, who will meet with individuals, often referred to them by a GP or by kind of other points of contact. And those link workers will talk to the individuals, try and understand their context and their needs, and then they will point them to community services. So whether that's kind of like walking groups or yoga classes or gardening clubs or craft groups, or like chaplaincy, things that will meet whatever their needs are. And so at Churchworks, we're really excited about the number of churches that we've seen engaging with social prescribing systems and linking up with their local GPs, with their link workers, and whether that means the link worker kind of referring to activities that the churches are running, so sending people off to things like renew wellbeing spaces, or to craft groups, or to warm welcome spaces, or to lunch clubs, or whatever it may be. There have been some really exciting and innovative things that churches have been doing that social prescribers have been able to refer to. But also we've been seeing some great examples of where churches have kind of been in conversation with local social prescribing link workers and have hosted link workers at warm welcome spaces or similar kind of places, so the link workers can meet vulnerable people in the community and then refer them on to other services. So there are 3 key ways that you can get involved. So I will put in the chat a link to the Churchworks website where we have a page on social prescribing. On there's a video from some of our friends at Kintsugi Hope talking about what social prescribing is. There's also a webinar which unpacks some examples of churches doing social prescribing across the UK. And then the final thing we'd love to invite you to be involved in is some research. So I'm working with a think tank called Theos, trying to do some mapping of how our church is engaged in social prescribing in the UK. And we are looking for church leaders to interview as part of that, whether they've been closely involved in social prescribing or not. We would love to just find out a bit more about how you're engaged in your community, and what might be some of the barriers to you kind of connecting into social prescribing systems. So if you would be interested in or be up for being interviewed as part of that research, that would be wonderful. And I'll also put my email address in the chat. It'd be great to hear from you.
Thank you, Esther. So as Esther mentioned, she'll stick those links in there, and if you fancy being interviewed by Esther, I can highly recommend. She's a wonderful questioner and researcher, so it's a great opportunity to get involved. And what an innovative thing, social prescribing, for the NHS to say, actually, a number of the issues that people are coming to us with aren't actually medical, they're social. And so how can we deflect people away from the health system to actually meet their needs in other places, in other communities? And the church can be such a great resource for meeting people's social and spiritual needs. So that's a wonderful thing to highlight. Thanks, Esther. We've got about 5 minutes now for questions. So if any of the kind of organizations you've heard from today, if you're like, oh, I've got a burning question, or I want to find out a bit more about how this links to my context, whatever your question is, if you've got a question for one of our speakers, perhaps if you want to use the raise your hand emoticon, is that what we call it these days? Emoji. Or you can raise your actual hand if you prefer to do that, and we will ask you your question. Equally, if you'd prefer to use the chat function, please do that as well. And I will try and look at those ones and field them to the right person. So are there any questions? Or have our speakers done such a thoroughly good job of explaining their resources? Love that. Brilliant. Okay. You always have to wait for a slightly awkward length of time, just in case someone has a question in these spaces. So I'm going to put aside my own awkwardness, just in case there's any more questions. Okay, wonderful. Well, before we kind of come into land, I would love to kind of hear in the chat, what are you taking away from this afternoon? We've heard about the national context of social isolation and loneliness. We've heard from different organisations and church leaders. You've spoken a bit in your breakout spaces. What are you taking away from this event this afternoon?
I've heard of a lot of organisations and resources of which I was totally unaware. So it's obviously been very helpful, and I've been sort of madly writing down websites, etc. And hopefully, when I can discuss this with other people in our church, we'll be able to really perhaps get involved in one or other of these things. I mean, they all sound wonderful. I think we've not been as active as we ought to have been over the past couple of years, because we are unfortunately without a minister at the moment, and the church leadership group is having to, you know, do this sort of looking like a swan on the surface and paddling like fury underneath. And so we really need to get some new things going, I think, you know, some new initiatives. And the idea that, I think, was it Maureen said that they had suggested that looking into one of these things was an idea for their house groups, how to get people to attend the learning, you know, the belonging course videos, etc. And that sounds like a brilliant idea. So I think I might put that to some people as well.
Thanks, Mary.
Yeah, see how people feel. But I think we need to know more about what is available. And I think this has been really helpful.
Great. And that's the whole point of Churchworks as well, really, is connecting the dots. I know Martin said earlier they kind of connected the dots between a kind of issue they were seeing and a solution in the church. And really, Churchworks is all about connecting you as church leaders with organisations nationally and government to actually work better together across denominations. So yeah, I'm really pleased to hear that. And as we kind of hear in church as well, you know, there isn't just a welcome team that stand on the door of our church. We are all the welcome team. You know, our whole church should be welcoming. So these resources are available to all of us. So it's great to hear that people are kind of encouraged by the belonging course, that they're up for hearing more about Renew Wellbeing, and encouraged overall that the church is digging into some of these issues. So I really hope it's been a valuable event for you this afternoon. We are going to be putting on another event a bit like this, a similar format in January. And what we're going to be focusing on in January is children and young people and mental health. So it was something that was kind of mentioned earlier, but as we know, kind of with COVID, kind of putting everyone into lockdown for such a long time, and the importance of social interaction for all of us, but specifically for that specific kind of demographic, we really want to think about how do we address children and young people's mental health kind of coming out of the pandemic and going forward. So I'm going to put the link to our event in the chat, so you can sign up now. It's going to be in January, on the 24th of January from 9 till 10:30 a.m. Feel free to invite people that you know that might benefit from that. There's a bit more information on the event, and we'll be revealing kind of who our speakers are going to be over the next month or so, but we'd love to invite you to that. I think that is all from us. So I'm going to gift you 8 minutes back of your time to go and make a cup of tea, which is just the dream, isn't it? So thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. Thank you so much to our speakers. And we look forward to being in touch with you at our next event. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Well done. Good stuff.
Thank you
Bye.
very much. Very informative. Good. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you very much. Bye.